Does Nintendo know how to do anything these days other than milk? I mean, everybody has their dicks hard and their panties wet over The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2, and I'm just sitting over here with this confused look on my face asking what the actual fuck is the appeal. This game is a copy and paste port job of the original. The only reason that you didn't see Breath of the Wild 2 released 2 years ago, because make no bones about it, the game's finished. All they did was hit copy and paste, change a couple things about the map, add a few weapons, change up the story, and that is it. This is not Breath of the Wild 2. This is Breath of the Wild 1.2. Minimal improvements across the board, but the only reason that you did not see this a couple of years ago when development was complete for this should-be DLC $15 expansion Breath of the Wild 2 is because Nintendo has made it their identity to make you wait half of a decade between installments of a franchise when they're not busy porting Wii U games or milking their other franchises with remasters and remakes. I mean, we cannot forget this is the same company that standardized releasing two versions of the same game in the Pokemon series, and people eat that shit up. I won't be surprised if we see Breath of the Wild Blue Edition, Breath of the Wild Green Edition, right? I mean, fucking Christ. It just doesn't end with these people. And the fact that there are people out there, functioning members, functioning adults in this society who think this game looks good, has me concerned for humanity more than I've ever been concerned before. More than I'm legitimately worried for the human race. I have such a fear. I have an anxiety in the pit of my heart because I'm seeing the greatest entertainment medium go down in a spectacular fan of flames because of trash like Breath of the Wild 2. It's the most disappointing thing I've ever seen in my life. You know, The Legend of Zelda, with the exception, with the very, and let's admit, let's call it what it was, with the mistake that was Majora's Mask, has never been about quick follow-ups and sequels that follow the same framework. It's been about reinventing itself with every, and I mean every, installment. Ocarina of Time bears no resemblance to Twilight Princess. Twilight Princess bears no resemblance to Link's Awakening. Link's Awakening bears no resemblance to Breath of the Wild. Yet here we go again. Same DNA and same framework as Nintendo of the 90s. Cocky-ass Nintendo when their N64 flopped and failed, coming in a very distant second to the PlayStation. You see, this is what happens when Nintendo ascends to the top of the throne. They get lazy, they get complacent, and they lose all creative will. I guarantee you, Breath of the Wild 2 is going to flop commercially, it's going to flop critically, and everybody who's dumb enough to pay for it is going to pop the cartridge into their Switch, play it for 5 or 10 minutes, they're going to put their system down, go look at themselves in the mirror, and ask, what has become of my life that I legitimately paid $60 for what should have been a $15 DLC? This is what the original Breath of the Wild DLC should have looked like. Not that trash motorcycle. Link doesn't use motorcycle. Oh my god, I can't even say this shit seriously. A motorcycle was DLC in Breath of the Wild, and they charge you $15 for it. If you pay for that, you are an idiot. You are the dumbest. I can't even, I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole because that is a whole other topic. Breath of the Wild 2 is a catastrophic failure. We see this with the gameplay. We see that Nintendo are complacent enough to try to sell us the same game twice. I urge you, dear listener, you're already on this video. You're already seeking out an alternative viewpoint from the paid-off modern video game media. I implore you to do some soul searching and ask yourself if it is something that you would explain and or persuade a rational person to do to pay $120 for the same game, because I wouldn't. I care too much about my friends, my family. I care too much about humanity as a fucking species to recommend that you cast aside your money for trash like this. Breath of the Wild 2 is an absolute joke. Breath of the Wild 2 should not exist for the bare reason that it's a copy and paste port job. It's a poor man's Breath of the Wild, and it proves Nintendo are uncreative as ever. Breath of the Wild 2, more like suffocating last gasp 2, because this will absolutely destroy the Zelda franchise. Mark my words, you're hearing it first from Dead Metal. There will be no Zelda after Breath of the Wild 2.